Good day, gentlemen. Dirk here again with the MGTOW solution. Today I want to go into a bit of my history. Don't worry, I don't mean all of it. That would take far too long. I may do that at some point, but today I just want to focus on how life has evolved for me since I ended my last real relationship in 2010. And don't get me wrong, there have been women in my life since then. I just haven't let any of it get serious. I'm not about to claim that everything's been perfect, but overall, choosing to remain single has been a very positive thing for me, and I'm going to point out some examples of how. So, I got out of that last relationship with no trouble at all because we weren't married, and I set out to basically reinvent my life and figured the mountains of the Sierra Nevada would be a good place to start. I spent a winter there teaching cross-country and telemark skiing, and then spent the following summer as a hiking guide, leading small groups on backpacking trips through some of the most beautiful backcountry on earth. Jobs like that don't pay much, but they were paying me to do something I loved, and it was a great gig, all things considered. While I was there, my life pretty much consisted of skiing all winter and rock climbing all summer. I was living in the mountains, surrounded by trees and waterfalls. I played some guitar and hung out with other climbers. My job required an hour on a bus every day up to the ski hill, then an hour coming back down, and it occurred to me that I could be using that time to study. I had been considering getting a master's degree for several years and decided to take the plunge and enrolled in a mostly online master's program. My goal was to work with military personnel as a civilian. I spent the next winter teaching skiing again and finished the bulk of my academic studies. Then I did a 6-month mentorship with the Coast Guard, where I gained a lot of respect for the Coasties. Being retired Navy, there's a bit of a rivalry there, but the Coast Guard is an outstanding organization. In fact, I had almost joined the Coast Guard instead of the Navy back in the day, but didn't pass the physical because you have to be at least 6'2". And why, you may ask, do you have to be 6'2" to join the Coast Guard? Because that way, if your boat sinks, you can wade to shore. Okay, good one, right? Anyway, shallow water sailor jokes aside, they were great. And when I finished the degree, I headed to Southern California to work with Marines. While I was there, I got back into triathlon, took up stand-up paddling, and rediscovered sailing, which I hadn't done in years. I took some advanced sailing classes, and life was good. I trained Marines and spent my weekends mostly on the water. Then, out of the blue, I learned of a new job opportunity, still with Marines, but this time back in the Sierra Nevada, which of course I loved. So I took it. Unfortunately, that job turned out to be a nightmare through no fault of the Marines. So after 4 months, I left. And that's a good place for me to interject the point that when you're living your own life, you have countless opportunities. I was moving on to better jobs whenever the opportunity presented itself, and that's an option you typically don't have if your life is entwined with a woman. And I used that freedom to work my way up in a new career field. So I resigned that position on faith that I'd find something better, which I did, but it took several months. I spent those months downhill skiing during the day and job searching at night. There was a bit of stress not knowing where I'd end up, but the skiing pretty much evened that out. Also during this period, I started volunteering at an animal shelter because I loved dogs. Some of my best friends have been dogs, and I really loved taking them all out on walks to make their lives a little better until they got adopted. I should point out that I had previously done volunteer work with search and rescue, but that didn't sit well with the woman I was involved with at the time. Being a volunteer meant it didn't produce resources, so you can imagine how that went. But since I had reclaimed my life, I could go work with my dogs as much as I wanted to. There was also a hot spring right up the road, and I'd hike up there a lot to chill out and watch the sunset. In fact, there's a photo of that in one of my earlier videos. Here it is again. Anyway, I landed another job with the Marines, this time on the East Coast, so I made the road trip and jumped into that. In my free time, I got more heavily into stand-up paddling and actually started training and racing with a group of great athletes. I managed to take my age group a couple times, and it was a blast. There were gorgeous beaches there too, but I mostly paddled in this murky river by my house called Gator Gulch, and it wasn't just a catchy name. I never had any close encounters with the gators, but I did hear them splash into the water in the distance upon hearing my approach once in a while. It added a bit of adrenaline to the whole experience, but I did some research to make sure I stayed safe. FYI, they just go sit on the bottom if they perceive a threat. I never actually saw a gator there, but I'm pretty sure they saw me. The problem with this job was the woman I reported to. She was incompetent, to put it nicely, and it was bad enough that when I got contacted by a headhunter, I was open to suggestions, and ended up moving on again. But there was a key event before I left that I'll never forget. I went for one last paddle in the Gator Gulch at the crack of dawn the day I left. It was the most still, quiet morning you could imagine, and the water was like glass. There were scattered white clouds overhead, and they were reflected on the surface of the water. There was blue sky and white clouds above me, and apparently below me. It was like paddling through the sky. Absolutely amazing. And I've had a lot of moments like that, many of them in the High Sierra. When you're out on skis at 0 dark 30 and the sun comes up, the light shifts between yellows, pinks, and oranges in the sky, and those colors are reflected on the snow. It's a stunning experience to ski through that landscape, and the only reason I was there was that I had the freedom to be there. And for me, those moments are what having my freedom is all about. Getting back to my new job, I rolled down to the Gulf Coast to work doing post-rehab reconditioning with regular troops. That was 2014, and I stayed there for 3 years. Overall, I had a great time. I learned a lot about sports medicine, and in my free time finally learned to windsurf properly. I had fucked around on old garage sale windsurfers before, but as a man going my own way, I decided to purchase proper gear and really got into it. And of course, I had many more of those memorable moments that only happen when you're outside. One day, I was ripping along on the windsurfer at a pretty good clip and was joined by a pod of dolphin. I later learned that they're attracted to the vibrations generated by the skeg. There were probably 30 of them, some really close, and it was all I could do to not get so distracted that I'd eat shit. I've always loved dolphin, and hauling ass with them was a really great experience. I also did some mountain biking and triathlons, sailed catamarans, and spent a lot of time at the beach. And given that my workplace had been deteriorating under female leadership, I accepted a much better job working with combat troops in the Northeast. Can't say I love this part of the country, but I can say I love the job. And here's the key part of that. Being a combat unit, I only work with men, and the place runs like a fucking Swiss watch. The professionalism of the troops I work with is off the charts. You couldn't ask for a better example of masculinity. These guys mean business, and there's no bullshit involved. No office politics. No walking on eggshells for fear of offending anyone. No affirmative action or quotas so that unqualified women can be included. They could join these guys if they wanted to, but they don't really seem interested. Outside of work, my life hasn't been as awesome as some other places, but I've managed to make the best of it. I've gotten in a bit of snowshoeing and skiing, and done some triathlons and a bunch of 5Ks with a running club. And notably, I've spent a fair amount of time working on my guitar playing. I actually took lessons, and I'm still no expert, but I'm definitely better than I used to be. So, the unit has been great, but I don't really like the area, and I've been working my ass off my entire adult life, so I'm going to take some time off. I love my job, but I need a break, and I've earned it. So I'm going to take one because I can, and I can because I'm single. I may take 3 months off, or I may retire. Either way, I'm going back out west where I'll be living a very minimalist lifestyle. And of course, this kind of thing isn't usually possible when you have a ball and chain. There's a reason for that ball and chain analogy, and it's noteworthy that there's no equivalent analogy for women. The point of all this is that in my case, I've been able to accomplish much more since I've been single than I ever could when I wasn't. In the past 8 years, I've moved like 6 times, and every one of those times my life was progressing forward. And I don't mean to imply that it's been easy. It hasn't. Not by a long shot. But if I were still married, it would have been impossible. And what have I had to sacrifice? Nothing. One could argue that I've had to sacrifice the company of a woman, but that carries no weight with me because I know from experience that the company isn't worth it. Seriously, it's not. I'm about to make my life center around mountain biking, hiking, and sailing, for God's sake. Why would I trade that for someone's company? Besides, I have friends. In fact, I'm going to go see some of them soon, and some of those guys are like brothers to me. We're going to run and ride mountain bikes through the forest, swim in the rivers, and maybe do a little rock climbing. Fuck, I may even go buy John from MGTOW His Freedom a beer, just because I can. Gentlemen, don't let anyone tell you MGTOW is a bad idea. There is no data to back up that claim, but reams of evidence that it's actually the best idea for men that we've seen in ages. Some people don't like it, but it's actually nobody's business. The only reason there's this perceived dark side to MGTOW is because we deal with feminism honestly and directly. And it isn't pretty. But you have to understand a problem in order to solve it, and then you can move on. So we do need to address this, and we need to occasionally deal with this. But ultimately, it's all about this, and this, and this, and this. It's really very simple. Stay single. Pursue your own goals. Live your own life. Defend your own freedom. Go your own way. Despite claims to the contrary, you don't owe anyone anything just by virtue of being a man. How you live is your choice. Choose wisely. Hit subscribe and bang that bell if you haven't, and give all MGTOW videos a thumbs up. Thanks for listening, guys, and have a great day.